to you. Chris McKinnon here alongside Kate Merrill with some breaking news. We're taking you live inside Suffolk Superior Court right now, where Michael McCarthy is about to be sentenced for his second-degree murder conviction of Bella Bond.
McCarthy is the ex-boyfriend of Bella's mother, Rochelle Bond. He faces life in prison with the chance of parole. Let's listen in as the judge has just entered the courtroom. Michael McCarthy's there on the left-hand side of your screen. Let's listen.
For sentencing, the defendant was found guilty on Monday, June 26th of murder in the second degree.
So, Mr. Deacon, does the Commonwealth now move for sentencing?
Commonwealth moves for sentencing, Your Honor. The Commonwealth would like to notify the court that Mr. Joseph Amoroso, who has been determined by DNA testing to be Bella Bond's father, under the statute, wishes to exercise his right to deliver a victim impact statement. He has prepared a statement, which I provided a courtesy copy of to the court, and he does wish to deliver it from the witness, or from wherever the court would like him to deliver it from.
Okay, I do have the typed copy, so Mr. Amoroso can step forward, and if he'd like to take a seat in the witness stand and address me, that would be great. So, Mr. Amoroso, this impact statement is for me, but I did read it. It seems appropriate. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Amoroso, and I am the father of Bella Bond. Bella is the name I chose because it means beautiful, and that she was. It was August 6, 2012 at approximately 9 p.m. when my wife, Courtney, and I listened to Rochelle give birth to Bella over speakerphone. I will never forget the first sound Bella made while entering this world. She wailed, and right away I knew she belonged to me with a set of lungs like hers. Bella was a happy and innocent child full of light. She was very smart and learning things rather quickly. She loved Hello Kitty, and she also knew how to make a pizza. Bella was a gift from God whose life was cut short at such a young age. But Bella was, still is, and always will be in my heart and soul. I believe that my daughter Bella would have excelled in college and grown up to be a very beautiful and successful woman that loved life. I can imagine her being a very loving, well-mannered, and put-together mother that loved children. I was robbed of my chance to be a father to Bella. No verdict changes that, and no justice on earth fixes that grief. The impact of this senseless act of violence has taken quite a toll, not only for me, but also my family. My father is in Florida, but asked that I share the following statement with the court. Our family is grateful that the jury's verdict has brought justice for Bella. We are comforted in knowing that Bella is safe in God's hands. May God bring us all peace in this season of sorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Amoroso.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Deacon.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth recommends that the court, obviously the court is obligated to impose the mandatory life sentence. The Commonwealth recommends that Your Honor, the Commonwealth is well aware that Your Honor has heard all the evidence and understands the facts and details of this case. The Commonwealth would point out that there are here no mitigating factors that the Commonwealth can see, either mitigating factors as set out under the sentencing guidelines or mitigating factors in the more common law sense of that term. There are several aggravating factors, primarily the age at which Bella Bond was murdered. She was approximately 2 months shy of her 3rd birthday. And the position of trust that the defendant occupied with respect to her as someone who lived with her, as her mother's boyfriend, who was charged with, if not her care, at least not injuring her, and who was trusted to be with her and trusted with her safety. For those reasons, Your Honor, the Commonwealth thinks it's appropriate for the court to set the parole eligibility at the maximum level of 25 years.
So, Mr. Shapiro, you wish to be heard?
I do. It's always hard to make a sentencing argument on behalf of an innocent person. If there were and had been justice in this courtroom, Mr. McCarthy would be sitting in the gallery watching Rochelle Bond being sentenced for her crimes, including having committed perjury in the course of a capital trial. But there was no justice for Mr. McCarthy here. Instead, we are forced to listen to Mr. Deakin make a vindictive, cynical, and completely disingenuous plea to impose the most serious penalty the law allows on Mr. McCarthy. I say vindictive because it is the most serious penalty which is hardly imposed in any civilized society today, even for the most serious crimes. The purpose of parole is to give a person a chance at redemption to the extent that that's appropriate. The parole board is the agency which is authorized by law to consider the appropriate parole eligibility after the minimum required by the law, which is 15 years. And it makes no sense whatsoever to deny that appropriate authority to the parole board by making a decision 15 years before somebody can assess and consider Mr. McCarthy in light of the 15 years that have passed. Now, I say Mr. Deakin was cynical and disingenuous because he is now asking for the most serious penalty for a crime about which we know next to nothing. We don't know when it was committed. We don't know how it was committed. In fact, Mr. Deakin has in effect disowned the statements he made at the beginning of the trial in which he claimed that Mr. McCarthy had violently and with intent committed this horrific crime. Yet when it came to the end of the case, he was perfectly happy to let the jury convict on the basis of some unsupported assumptions that Rochelle Bond had participated in the crime. And indeed, if that's so, if there was participation by another, which he certainly opened the door to, we don't know who did what the motive was, or how it happened. If anything, this crime, alleged and proven before this jury, is on the very least aggravated end of the spectrum. I think it's fair to say that the testimony of Rochelle Bond as to what she claimed happened was completely disproved by the medical examiner. It was contradicted by the medical examiner, and every bit of the forensic and medical evidence that was introduced. So we're left not knowing what happened because what she said clearly was a lie. We don't know when it happened because when she said it happened, that clearly was a lie. So we're left with only a verdict which probably rested on the third prong of malice, that an act was done that somebody who did it should have known would lead to death, which is the least serious of all of the of all of the crimes, all of the murder crimes with which he was charged. So, looking at it from that point of view, we urge the court to impose the minimum parole eligibility of 15 years, which of course has been the law in the Commonwealth for as long as I can remember. And the most recent change, which gives the judge discretion without any apparent guidelines as to how to exercise that discretion, the Commonwealth has done fine with the sentences that have been authorized in the past, and with the parole board, which has exercised its authority to decide on parole for years and is completely competent to do that. In addition to the crime being on the very low end of the spectrum of seriousness, one should also look at Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McCarthy has had a hard life. That was clear in all of the testimony. Drug addiction was a problem he suffered from throughout his life, from his adolescence until the day he was arrested. He had, at most, a minor criminal record which was related in every respect to feeding the habit: shoplifting, larceny, the least serious of crimes. So, looking at him as a person and looking at the offense, we urge the court to exercise its discretion and impose the 15-year parole eligibility date on the life sentence, not to forget the fact that it is a life sentence, which is the most serious penalty that can be imposed. Thank you.
In light of some of those comments, I do want to say a few things about the trial the defendant received. It was a very fair trial. The prosecution presented the evidence in a very fair and professional manner. Defense counsel provided Mr. McCarthy with exceptional representation. And although I don't believe I made any legal errors, there is an appellate court which will review the record in this case and make sure that I didn't. The jury was chosen after a week of individual questioning by counsel and myself. They paid close attention to the evidence through almost 3 weeks of testimony, and then they carefully sifted through that evidence over 5 days of deliberations. They were allowed to consider not only first-degree murder, second-degree murder, but also the lesser-included offense of involuntary manslaughter, which I did submit to them over the defense attorney's objection. The jury has now spoken. The defendant has been found guilty of murder in the second degree. Mr. Shapiro says this is not at the aggravated end of the spectrum, and he talks about the third prong of malice. But just so we're clear here, although it was the verdict meant that the jury was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that this murder was the result of any deliberate plan on the defendant's part, it was convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. McCarthy intended to cause grievous bodily harm to a 2-year-old child, or intended to do an act which a reasonable person would have known would result in that child's death. And the penalty for second-degree murder is mandatory, life in prison, reflecting the seriousness of that crime. Now, as both counsel point out, I do have some discretion as to the parole eligibility, and the considerations as to that are not identical, in my view, to the considerations I use in terms of fashioning sentence. But I think there are some things that I still need to consider that I would consider both in imposing a sentence of term of years and in terms of the parole eligibility, now that the legislature has decided to give the court discretion to extend that beyond the 15 years. It's certainly hard to predict what Mr. McCarthy, what kind of person he'll be more than a decade from now. But in light of the vulnerability of the victim, the circumstances that surrounded the cover-up of her death, I determined that he should not be parole eligible for at least 20 years. So with that, I'll have the clerk impose the sentence.
McCarthy, please stand up. The jury, having returned a verdict of guilty against you of murder in the second degree, the court, in consideration of your offense, now sentences you to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Cedar Junction for and during your natural life, with parole eligibility after 20 years. The court deems you have served 650 days spent in custody awaiting disposition of this matter. That goes back to the date of arrest of 9/18/2015. The court imposed a $90 victim witness fee. You're notified of your duty to supply a DNA sample to the DNA laboratory, and you're notified of your right to appeal this conviction pursuant to rules of appellate procedure. You stand committed, sir.
Thank you.
All right, you've been listening live here inside the courtroom where the judge, Janet Sanders, has just sentenced Michael McCarthy to life in prison for the murder of Bella Bond with the eligibility of parole in 20 years. The prosecution had asked her to put him in jail with the possibility of parole in 25 years. The defense had asked for the minimum 15 years. She settled right in the middle at 20 years, citing the vulnerability, of course, of that young child, Bella Bond, who he was convicted of murdering.
That's right. And Bella Bond's mother, Rochelle Bond, you might remember this, was supposed to be sentenced yesterday. That was pushed back a little bit as well. So we will stay on top of that part of the story as well when her sentencing comes up in about 2 weeks here as well. So we now know what Michael McCarthy will be facing: life in prison with eligibility for parole after 20 years.
All right, we will have a complete wrap of all of this for you coming up at the news at noon, but stay with WBZ on air and online for continuing coverage. We now send you back to your regular scheduled program.